the woman who didn't believe in forever. The bus rumbled down the long stretch of road that led to nowhere, or at least, that's how it felt to Clara Evans. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the late summer fields blur into amber streaks. The ticket in her hand was damp from her fingers, and the word Maplewood was smudged at the corner. She hadn't meant to come here. She hadn't meant to start over again. But after losing almost everything in the city, the job, the apartment, and that final hollow relationship that ended with a voicemail, Maplewood was the last on the map that felt untainted. Her grandmother used to live here. The woman who'd taught her how to plant flowers in empty coffee tins and bake bread when there was nothing else left in the pantry. Clara clutched her worn duffel bag, the bus jerking to a stop. "End of the line," the driver called. The air outside was thick with the scent of rain and cut grass. A sleepy town unfolded before her, one main street, a diner with flickering lights, and a general store that looked like it had been there since the dawn of time. She inhaled deeply. It wasn't the city, and maybe that was exactly what she needed. The Willow Creek Diner was the kind of place where time forgot to move forward. A bell jingled overhead as Clara stepped inside. The smell of coffee and something sweet, maybe cinnamon rolls, wrapped around her like a memory. She found a booth near the window and dropped her bag beside her. Her hands still trembled when she reached for the menu. It had been weeks since she'd spoken more than a handful of words to anyone. "Coffee?" a warm voice asked. She looked up and met eyes the color of late autumn, brown, flecked with gold. The man holding the pot couldn't have been much older than her, maybe 35. His smile came easy, the kind that didn't need effort. "Please," she said. He poured, the steam curling between them. "You new around here? Is it that obvious?" He chuckled. "Maplewood's not big enough for strangers. You'll stand out until you don't." She tried to smile back. "I'm just stopping through. Looking for work." "Well, you might have just found it," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. "We've been short a server since May. You interested?" Her heart skipped. "Seriously?" "Seriously," he said, extending his hand. "Name's Daniel Reed. I own the place, kind of inherited it, actually. And you are?" "Clara. Clara Evans." "Well, Clara Evans," he said, his grin widening, "welcome to the slowest diner in the fastest world." Something about his tone made her laugh for the first time in months. By the end of the week, Clara had learned 3 things about Daniel Reed. 1. He made the world's worst coffee but insisted it was an acquired taste. 2. He lived above the diner with his 3 kids, though she'd only seen them in passing, 2 girls and a boy, all under 10. 3. He smiled like a man who'd known loss but chose to laugh anyway. Clara told herself it didn't matter. She was just working, saving up, and then she'd leave. No roots. No promises. No ties. But Maplewood had a way of weaving you in quietly. The locals were kind. Mrs. Jensen, who ran the post office, insisted on slipping her extra muffins. Old Mr. Harris from the gas station waved every morning when she walked by. And Daniel made her feel like she'd been seen for the first time in years. It started small. A spilled milkshake. A pair of giggling twins who thought Clara's braids were magical. The boy, Eli, the oldest, was quieter. He watched her carefully, like he was trying to decide if she'd stay. "Dad says people leave," he told her one afternoon, his little hands busy coloring at the counter. "But you don't look like someone who leaves." Clara froze. "No." He shook his head. "You look like someone who builds things. Mama used to build forts with us. Maybe you could, too." That night, she cried in the tiny apartment above the old hardware store she was renting. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because no one had ever said something so simple, and yet so full of hope. Weeks turned into months. The rhythm of the diner became her heartbeat. The hiss of the coffee machine, the clatter of plates, the laughter that filled the slow afternoons. Daniel and Clara fell into an easy friendship, teasing, late-night talks while closing up, shared silence that didn't feel awkward. One rainy evening, when thunder rolled like distant drums, Clara stayed late to help him fix a leaky window. The kids had already gone upstairs to bed. "You didn't have to stay," Daniel said, his sleeves rolled up, hair damp from the rain. "Neither did you," she replied, passing him a towel. He chuckled. "Perks of owning the place, I guess. No one to yell at me if I close late. Except your kids." He grinned. "They do that plenty." The laughter faded, replaced by a comfortable quiet. "Clara," he said softly, "you don't talk much about where you came from." She shrugged. "Not much to tell. I think there's plenty to tell. You just don't want to say it yet." She turned away, pretending to inspect the broken window latch. "Maybe I'm just not the kind of person you think I am." "Then tell me who you are," he said, stepping closer. "I'm someone who leaves before anyone notices," she whispered. He studied her for a long moment. "Maybe you've just been in the wrong places." The rain fell harder. For the first time in a long time, she didn't want to run. A few days later, she found herself sitting on the porch of the diner, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The kids were chasing fireflies in the yard. Laughter, pure, unfiltered, filled the air. Daniel sat beside her, 2 mugs of lemonade in hand. "They've taken a real shine to you." Clara smiled faintly. "They're good kids." "Yeah. They miss their mom, though." Her chest tightened. "I didn't mean to." He shook his head. "No, it's not that. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just hard. Losing her. They were little when she passed." Silence settled between them, heavy but gentle. "I'm sorry," Clara said quietly. "Don't be. We do okay. Some days are harder than others." The children's laughter drifted toward them again, bright and untamed. She whispered, "I could never be a mother," Clara said under her breath, almost to herself. Daniel turned to her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good thing," he murmured, his voice soft but sure. "I've already got 3 little ones calling you Mama." Her breath caught. For a moment, time stopped. The fireflies hung motionless in the air. The ache she'd been carrying all her life cracked open, and in its place bloomed something she hadn't dared to name: belonging. Learning to stay. The next morning, Maplewood woke to the hush that only came after rain. The streets gleamed, and the scent of wet earth lingered in the air. Clara stood outside the diner, her apron tied loosely around her waist, watching the clouds drift apart. The kids' laughter still echoed in her mind from the night before, Eli chasing fireflies, the twins shouting for her to "Look, look!" She hadn't felt something like that in years. And Daniel's words, those impossible gentle words, had rooted somewhere deep inside her. "Good thing I've already got 3 little ones calling you Mama." She hadn't known what to say then. So she hadn't said anything at all. Now, the quiet between them was different. Softer. Charged with the kind of tenderness that scared her more than any heartbreak ever had. Inside the diner, the morning rush began. Farmers came for their coffee and eggs, schoolteachers for their cinnamon rolls. Clara moved between tables, her smile easy, her voice light. Daniel was at the counter, wiping mugs and pretending not to watch her, but he did, every chance he got. There was something in the way she moved now, the way she laughed with Mrs. Jensen, the way the twins had started calling her Clara Bear when she helped them with their homework upstairs. She belonged here, even if she didn't see it yet. That evening, after the last customer left and the kids were upstairs brushing their teeth, Daniel leaned against the counter. "You've been quiet today," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "Just tired." He raised a brow. "Tired, huh? Or thinking too much?" She sighed, setting down the rag she'd been holding. "Daniel, about last night." He held up a hand. "You don't have to explain." "But I do." She looked down. "You were kind. But I don't want you, or the kids, to get the wrong idea. I'm not. I can't." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Can't what?" "Be a mother," she whispered, the same words she'd said before. "I wouldn't know how. I didn't exactly grow up with a good example. And every time I try to care for someone, I mess it up." Daniel's expression softened. "Clara, nobody knows how. You just love as best you can, and the rest figures itself out." "That's easy for you to say. You've got the patience of a saint." He chuckled. "Saints lose their temper too. I've burned pancakes, yelled when I shouldn't have, forgotten birthdays. But those kids still come running every morning because they know I'm trying. You don't have to be perfect to be family." Her eyes stung. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't," he said gently. "But it's worth it." She wanted to believe him. The next few weeks tested her resolve. The twins got sick. Eli started acting out at school. The diner's old coffee machine broke, and a shipment of supplies got delayed. For the first time, Clara didn't run. She stayed up late with the girls, wiping foreheads and whispering lullabies she barely remembered from her childhood. She marched to Eli's school when he punched another boy for teasing him about not having a real mom. When the principal asked if she was his guardian, Eli looked up from his chair and said, without hesitation, "She's my almost mom." Clara froze. Daniel, who'd come straight from the diner still wearing his apron, squeezed her hand under the table. Afterward, in the parking lot, she tried to speak, but he stopped her. "Don't," he said softly. "You did good." That night, as the rain began to fall again, she realized she wasn't afraid of staying anymore. What scared her now was leaving. Winter came to Maplewood in quiet silver sheets. The diner grew cozier, warm lights glowing against frosted windows, laughter spilling from booths as the regulars traded stories. Clara hung garlands with the twins while Daniel wrestled with a stubborn Christmas tree stand. "Hold it still," he groaned. "I am holding it still," Clara said, laughing as the tree tilted sideways. Eli giggled from the couch. "You guys are terrible at this." "Your dad's the problem," Clara teased. "Oh, is that right?" Daniel asked, pretending to glare. "Maybe you should come supervise, Miss Expert." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world went still again. Something about the way he looked at her, steady, certain, made her forget to breathe. "Maybe I will," she said softly. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, they stood together on the porch, watching snow fall under the streetlight. Daniel held 2 mugs of cocoa. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. She looked out at the darkened street. "Every day." He didn't flinch. "And yet you're still here." "I don't know why," she admitted. "I keep waiting for the part where I mess everything up. But somehow, I haven't yet." "Maybe you won't," he said quietly. She turned to face him. "You really believe that?" "I believe in you." The snow fell slower then, as if the world itself was listening. "Daniel," she whispered, "I'm scared." "I know. I don't know how to love like this." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then let me show you." Her breath trembled. And when he leaned in, it wasn't a rush or a storm, it was a promise. A soft, steady promise that maybe, just maybe, she could stay. Christmas morning came with squeals and wrapping paper and the smell of cinnamon. Eli handed Clara a small box wrapped in silver foil. "We all made it," he said proudly. Inside was a lopsided necklace with 3 tiny wooden beads, each one painted by a different little hand. "It's for you," Eli said. "Because you're ours now." Her throat closed. "Oh, sweetheart!" The twins threw their arms around her legs, shouting, "Merry Christmas, Mama Clara!" And before she could stop herself, before the tears could blur it all away, she whispered the words that had once terrified her. "I love you too." Daniel watched from the doorway, his eyes soft and full of everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. When she looked up at him, she saw it, not just the man who'd offered her a job and a place to belong, but the man who'd given her back her heart. He smiled, the same easy, honest smile that had disarmed her months ago. And when she crossed the room, wrapping her arms around him, she whispered again, just for him. "I said I could never be a mother." He kissed the top of her head. "Good thing," he murmured, his voice breaking with quiet laughter. "I've already got 3 calling you Mama." Epilogue. A year later. The Willow Creek Diner had a new sign, painted in soft blue letters that read, "Reed and Evans Family Diner." The coffee still wasn't great, but the laughter was louder, the mornings brighter. And every once in a while, when a stranger walked in looking like they'd lost their way, Clara would hand them a cup of coffee, smile gently, and say, "Welcome to Maplewood. You'll fit right in." Because she knew now, home wasn't a place you found. It was the people who refused to let you leave.